The World Health Assembly is set to vote in less than 2 months on giving the World Health Organization the sole ability to determine public health emergencies and the global response. Well, we will discuss the prophetic implications of this and other global governance schemes such as UNESCO, the border crisis, Paris Climate Agreement, and the Sustainable Development Goals on this edition of the Endtime Show. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. I do thank you for joining me on this edition of the Endtime Show. And before we begin into this world government scheme that's going on, I want to let you know that this weekend, my wife and I and my mother-in-law, Irvin Baxter's wife, Judy, will be in Plymouth, Michigan. And I know we always have a great conference there. It's always packed out. So we'll be at the Rock Church of Plymouth, 1100 West Ann Arbor Trail. And that's Saturday evening, April 20th at 7 p.m. And I'll be teaching the Green Horsemen in World War III. Wow, what a relevant lesson that is for what's going on in the Middle East. And then Sunday morning, April the 21st, at 10:30 a.m., we'll be going through the Breaking Prophecy News. We'll be going through the big Q&A session that we always have. It's always a great time. So looking forward to seeing all of you in Plymouth, Michigan this weekend. You know, when we talk about world government, the issue on which all other issues turns, if you understand it, is globalism. Will America continue down the path to globalization and the New World Order, or will we reverse our course and reclaim our sovereignty? I mean, will we trade our Declaration of Independence for a Declaration of Interdependence? It's where we're headed. And the establishment says that we must do that. Or will we defend our borders and the Judeo-Christian beliefs that have made us the land of the free and the home of the brave? This is the number one thing coming up in our presidential election. You know, after the upcoming presidential debates, after the discussions of the political pundits, and after all the arguments around the kitchen tables, this election will boil down to one issue, or it should: globalism versus national sovereignty. So let me explain. Global elites have been for decades now working just assiduously to create a world government. The goal is a global governing system so all-inclusive and minutely detailed that it will control all aspects of every person's life. Their intention is to eventually regulate all individual production and consumption patterns, everything. And the ultimate objective is thought manipulation, of course, resulting in absolute obedience and allegiance to this world governing body, every single person on the earth. That's the goal. Well, the outcome of these efforts is the formation of international institutions specifically designed not to govern a single nation, but to govern the entire world. And these would include many recognizable organizations. Consider the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the International Criminal Court. Again, this is a world government they're building. The World Bank, the World Health Organization, the WHO, which I'll be talking a lot about today, the World Trade Organization, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and there's many others. That's just to name a few. But these entities are designed to govern the entire world. And I want to make sure you understand that our upcoming presidential election should be focused on, do we align ourselves with these world governing entities, or do we pull out of that? That's really, all the other issues really stem from that. And believe it or not, abortion, all of them. And so it's something we need to be looking at. We're going to be doing a deep dive into that. First, let me mention Birch Gold. You know, these world government enthusiasts or globalists, they want to impose digital currencies and digital IDs on the populations of the world. It would allow officials to prohibit you from purchasing certain products and easily freeze or seize part of your bank accounts. It would, in essence, give the governments or central banks the ability to take more control over your money. There are some concerned Americans that are diversifying their assets into physical gold with the help of the Birch Gold Group. If you want a physical asset held in a tax-sheltered retirement account, go to birchgold.com/endtime to get your free info kit on gold. Maybe you've got an IRA or a 401k from a previous employer that's just been gathering dust. Well, Birch Gold can help you convert that into an IRA in gold, and you don't have to pay a penny out of pocket. So go to birchgold.com/endtime and claim your free info kit on gold, because if digital currencies do become a reality, you may wish to have some gold to fall back on. Okay, world government, here we go. The United Nations is the seat of this world government. Back in 2012, I've written so many articles on this. Back in 2012, a couple gentlemen, Fenn Olsler Hampson, Paul Heimbecker, and Gordon S. Smith, they were of the Ontario-based Center for International Governments Innovation, and they contributed their thoughts about the role of the United Nations and the future of global governance in a feature of course, the deep states, the establishment's Council on Foreign Relations, their Council of Councils initiative. This is what they said, and I'm quoting: "As we adapt to emerging global threats, let's not lose sight of what we have achieved. The United Nations has largely fulfilled the chartered goals established in the San Francisco, what would it be, 70 plus years ago now, back in 1945. And in doing so, we have spawned an extensive body of international laws, treaties, norms, practices, and institutions that govern most facets of interstate relations." It's a world government. "With these apps, the United Nations Charter has become the world's central operating system, the motherboard of global governance." End quote. So, the plan from the get-go was a world government. And the plan of this world government and its citizens and the plan to govern them is progressing quite rapidly, isn't it? I mean, think about, you've heard the term New World Order. After World War II, the United States led the efforts to create this New World Order, and for the last 70 plus years has been one of the principal drivers behind it. Every administration since the founding of the United Nations, whether Republican or Democrat, except Donald Trump, and some of them have just wandered into it drunken, like a drunken sailor. Some of them have been a little reserved, but still, at the end of their tenure, they fully supported this New World Order. Again, except Donald Trump. He was just kind of an anomaly. Well, of course, at the end of World War II, they were wielding vast amounts of international power, along with the other four victor nations of World War II, the United States, China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom. These were the five victor nations of World War II, and they were the five permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, which has the veto power over any Security Council resolution. That's where the power lies in the United Nations. According to the prophecies, there will be a world government established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So let me talk to you about that before we get into all of these globalist plans that are playing out right now. The 650 years before John wrote the book of Revelation, the prophet Daniel was given a vision of four beasts that represented kingdoms or nations that would exist at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ, in our era right now, right here at the end of the age. The four beasts described in Daniel 7:4-7, and the modern nations that they symbolize are a lion with eagle's wings, that's Great Britain and the United States, a bear, the modern-day nation of Russia, a four-headed leopard, which is Germany, and a 10-horned beast, which would symbolize the reborn Holy Roman Empire or the current European Union. In Revelation, John uses these same symbols as nations to describe the end-time world government, a federalization of nations. In John's account, in Revelation 13, the four separate nations of Daniel 7 have federalized into one large global governing body. And let me give you kind of the interpretation of it. This would be Revelation 13, let's go 13, 1 and 2. John said, I stood up on the sand of the sea. I saw a single beast, not four separate beasts from Daniel 7, but a single combo beast come up out of the sea. It had 7 heads and 10 horns. Upon his horns, which would symbolize the European Union, were 10 crowns. Upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And this beast which John saw was like unto a leopard, Germany. It had the feet of a bear, Russia, mouth of the lion, Great Britain, and the dragon, or Satan himself, gives this entity its power, seat, and great authority. So, folks, this is a 2,000-year-old prophecy of a federalization of nations or a world governing body. The Bible says the entire world would wonder after this beast, these nations. It's the world government that's currently being established on the earth. Again, the United Nations is the seat of that world governing body. Then it has entities around it designed to govern the world, a world government. Well, I want to go through some information that's coming across the wire now, and The Federalist is one of the news sources I'm going to use. There's an article there called The World Health Organization's Global Governance Gambit or Scheme, and that it's a threat to democracy. The information comes from I want to make sure I get this right here. The information comes from Kristen A. Ullman, who is the president of Eagle Forum and a steering committee member for the Sovereignty Coalition. She's talking about this world governing, this globalist situation that's going on. And I pulled a few excerpts from the article, and I want you to hear them, and I'm quoting. The World Health Assembly is set to vote on giving the World Health Organization the sole ability to determine public health emergencies and the global response to that. So, our elected officials are supposed to do that, but no, they're voting on something different than this, a global governing entity having the power. The left, of course, they love to call any person or policy that disagrees with them a threat to democracy, they say. But put aside the fact that the United States is not a democracy, but a constitutional and federal republic, the biggest threats to our form of government, and one being pushed by the Biden administration and largely ignored by Congress, are the upcoming votes on two World Health Organization, or I should say the WHO, these instruments that violate our representative system. Each element of our Constitution system is at risk if the White House and Congress fail to stop the World Health Organization's global governance scheme. The instruments under consideration by the WHO are amendments to the international health regulations and the concurrent pandemic treaty, both of which will be voted on by the World Health Assembly. It's made up of 196 member states in less than 2 months. The purpose of these documents is to give the World Health Organization, the Director General, the sole ability not only to declare public health emergencies of international concern, but to mandate for every nation the global response, such as lockdowns, travel restrictions, mandatory testing and vaccinations, and border closures. Now think about that. Not our federal government, not our local governments or our governor, but a foreign entity, the World Health Organization, which is part of the world government that's being established. Again, do we want to vote for somebody who is pro-globalism, pushing the United States into world government, or somebody who believes in America first? It's a decision we're going to have to make this coming November. And this is just, honestly, you vote for who you want to. I'm just telling you, these are the facts on the ground. In addition here, nations will be forced to spend billions of dollars to implement this global governance framework based on the principle of equity. Everybody's got to be equal, right? So first, this is a threat to our constitutional republic because it removes the people's elected representatives from their decision-making roles. Our elected officials on local, state, and federal level, they'll know if this is passed, they will no longer control when and what is considered a public health emergency or what the government response will be to that. The Director General, I think his name is Tedros, will have the sole authority to make declarations not only for actual pandemics, but for any issue that has the potential to affect global health. So you consider climate change, gun violence, food security, abortion laws, rules for transgender medical interventions, and any other so-called threat to public health. Remember, I told you that globalism, these issues that should determine how the vote goes in November, if we've got to understand what globalism is. All the other issues come off of that. If we lose our sovereignty, none of the rest of this stuff really matters, right? So the WHO has already weighed in on the global health risks tied to each of these hot-button political issues. And there will be no ability for citizens to vote for or against the decision makers, undermining the very concept of representative democracy. And so, again, these are going to be voted on within a couple months. If they don't pass, hallelujah. But if they do, this will be what we're facing. So, don't want that, right? I mean, I don't want that here in America. In addition, these documents are a threat to the constitutional protections that we now enjoy. The establishment of a global surveillance state by the WHO threatens the basic privacy rights of all Americans, while the requirement in all these accords for nations to combat false, misleading, misinformation, or disinformation, well, who determines that? That could easily violate our First Amendment freedom of speech. I mean, if they're trying to push something here in America and a conservative organization, an Endtime Ministries, a Glenn Beck, a Dennis Prager, a Ben Shapiro, any of these, to say something against that, they want to have the ability to stop that. Each nation will be required to share intellectual property for use by other countries, and decimating our unique American patent rights and our constitutional protections will be undermined if the WHO gets its way. And finally, under our federal system, the regulation of health care is under the purview of the states, including regulating the licensure of doctors, pharmacies, hospitals, and determining what vaccinations are required for school attendance. So we experienced this clearly during the COVID crisis, when state and local leaders had, for the most part, the ability to decide when and how businesses and schools would reopen. Under the pandemic treaty and accompanying IHR amendments, this authority would be stripped from the states and given to an international organization in clear violation of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. So, according to the Federalist, to add insult to the very real injury about to befall us if this gets passed, is the fact that the White House plans to sign on to the pandemic treaty and IHR amendments by executive agreement rather than submit them to the Senate for its constitutionally mandated advice and consent. And the U.S. Senate appears willing to accept this usurpation of their power. Last March, Senator Ron Johnson, who's a Republican from Wisconsin, he offered an amendment to require the Senate vote on this pandemic treaty, but it failed to gain even one Democratic vote. This dereliction of duty on behalf of the Senate, it shouldn't be excused. I mean, we're getting just sucked up into this vacuum of world government. So, is there a threat to democracy facing our country today? Absolutely. Indeed there is. It is the threat to our very constitutional republic by the World Health Organization via its proposed pandemic treaties and the refusal of the administration and the Senate to do anything to stop it. And this threat is not rhetorical, but it's very real. And I just want you to understand that from a prophetic perspective, the Bible says there's going to be a world government in the end time. The Antichrist will eventually usurp authority over this world governing system. What's going on right now is they're creating this world governing body. They are trying to strip the nations of their sovereignty. It's called globalism. The nation state's obsolete. Everybody will do away with their borders, and everybody will yield up their sovereignty and their armies to this one world governing body. The process of globalization. Well, we're staring this thing right in the face, you guys. I mean, back in April 2020, the Washington Examiner reported that the Trump administration notified Congress that the U.S. would withdraw from the World Health Organization. And you remember all of the establishment was just jumping up and down screaming because Donald Trump, in one way after another. Now, I know everybody says you guys pro-Trump and you're pro this and that. Listen, I'm pro-God. I am a Christian. I'm pro-God. I am pro-America. There's nothing wrong with that. America was founded on Judeo-Christian principles. Many of the revivals that happened in the world, the initial outpouring of the Holy Ghost at the Azusa Street revivals and all this, that happened in America. And so, yes, I am pro-America. I believe we can have great revivals can come out of this nation if we will do away with our, letting Hollywood set our moral compass instead of the Bible, and we'll get back to the things we need to get back to. And yes, I love America. I don't want to belong. I love this country. We signed a Declaration of Independence, not to be under the reign of a foreign power ever again. We come out from under King George. Didn't want to be a part of that. Now we have leaders here who are just pushing us right back into that. One of the things I've seen Donald Trump do, you say, do you agree with everything Donald Trump did? No, I don't. But many things that he did do were good. He was pulling us out of world governing body. One of the things was we were withdrawing from the World Health Organization. And one official said the United States notice of withdrawal that would have been effective July 6, 2021 had been submitted to the UN General Secretary General, who is the depository for the World Health Organization. Well, Trump announced his plan to suspend funding from the WHO back on April 14th, 2020, and then he declared a temporary freeze on U.S. funding to the organization. It was in May of that year, and he was threatening a permanent halt without substantive improvements. The United States is the largest contributor. Back in 2020, we're the largest annual contributor to the World Health Organization, accounting for about 15% of the organization's budget, with roughly, it was about $400 million. And Trump back then, sent a letter to the World Health Organization Director General Tedros, not going to try to attempt to say the rest of his name, and that was in May. And he was saying his administration's review of the World Health Organization revealed an alarming lack of independence from the People's Republic of China, and Trump accused the WHO of consistently ignoring credible reports of the virus spreading in Wuhan in December of 2019 and even earlier. And he said the WHO probably did not share key information about the coronavirus for political reasons. Can you imagine that? Now imagine that entity having control of future pandemics and the control of lockdowns and different things here in the United States. But they're in cahoots with China and all these other places. So these globalists believe the answer to global peace and security is a one world government. We don't want anything to do with the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the International Criminal Court, the World Bank. We don't want anything to do with that. We want America first. And then let us voluntarily help other nations, which we will do. We have done throughout time. But I don't want a world government dictating to us what to do, especially if somebody like an Adolf Hitler, or much worse, like the Antichrist, gets control of that entity. And so these globalists believe the answer to global peace and security is a one world government. And this idea has been promoted in colleges, the press, business circles, and even through religious institutions until it gained virtual control over both the Republican and Democrat parties. And that's the reason no matter which party has been in power over the last 50 years plus, the country seems to keep moving in the same direction, the direction of global governance. This is very prophesied. And so it's very important that we talk about it. But I've got some good news coming up in our next segment, because regardless of what it looks like right now, the United States is not going to be part of that in the near future. We'll talk about it on the next segment.
A voice spoke to me and said, "I've got something I want to show you." I was so sure God had talked to me, and I was stunned by what I saw.
A direct fulfillment of this over 2,500-year-old prophecy. The United States will stand with Israel.
Why haven't I ever seen this before?
1/3 of humanity will die. What do these beasts symbolize?
The lion, the bear, the leopard.
The combined beast from Revelation 13 represents the end-time government of the Antichrist. Understanding the end time.
Now streaming on Endtime Plus and available to order at endtime.com/UET. Go to endtime.com/UET or call 800-ENDTIME.
What if you could understand Bible prophecy? Dave Robbins, the host of the Endtime Show's TV and radio programs, is holding a free prophecy conference near you. Gain peace and understanding about what the Bible says concerning end-time prophecy. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com/events to see when Dave will be in a location near you.
You know, everyone, I've been following this world government for years and years now. It's very, very real. Many of the things that the current administration are doing in America are pushing us straight into the arms of a world governing body. And it's something we certainly need to pay attention to, especially as we go in and decide who's in the next administration. Like I've said before, I would love to have a conversation with whoever the two individuals are that are going to be the presidential candidates. I'd love to talk to Donald Trump, and I'd love to talk to, if it's Joe Biden or whoever it ends up being, I'd love to talk to them. And I'd love to, in front of all of America and the world, ask them these pointed questions about globalism. I mean, we like to get caught up in the symptoms of globalism, but very few times are they asked the hard questions about globalism, but they should be. And I'd love to have them on our program. If anybody has contacts with Donald Trump or with Joe Biden, I wonder if they would allow me to ask Joe Biden anything other than a softball question. Do you think so? I don't know. Because he's a globalist, and he has been for decades now, you guys. I think Donald Trump, from the things that he's done, or at least his advisors, they get it. We can't be part of much of this. But those who have been leading the United States steadily towards a world governing body, especially over during the Clintons and the Bushes and President Obama and then Joe Biden, they have become known as the establishment or the deep state, whether they're Democrat or Republican. We kind of got to wipe that. I mean, I know Donald Trump is saying he's a Republican, but you kind of got to wipe that from your mind. I'm going to vote whoever this, and the way I vote is whoever is, you know, it's it is if somebody's pro-abortion and somebody's anti-abortion, the thing is, that's easy for me. If somebody's pro-globalism and somebody's anti-globalism, that's easy for me. And so it really becomes super easy. I mean, the economy can go up or down and a lot of stuff, and I want it to go down like everybody else. But to me, some of these issues are globalism's much more important than the economy. I promise you. If you lose your sovereignty, there will be other, non-United States entities, foreign entities that could tell you what to do as an American citizen. I want that to sink in. So, what does the establishment or the deep state believe? The globalists believe that the nation state has outlived its usefulness. National sovereignty has become the problem, and the system of world government is the only solution. The reasoning kind of goes like, history shows that sovereign nations inevitably, sooner or later, they come into conflict. And when those conflicts can't be worked out through diplomacy, then nations have to resort to war. This is what's being sold. Weapons of mass destruction have become so powerful that mankind now has the ability to destroy itself. And therefore, war must be eliminated, even outlawed. But somebody has to manage that, right? The only way to do that is to eliminate nations, disband their national armies, and place all arms under a global authority, and thus making war impossible. So when a dispute arises among the states, they can take their issues before a world governing entity like the United Nations, present their cases before the UN Security Council, and all nations would then agree to abide by the decisions of the global authority, thus eliminating war forever. Now this is going on in the mind of these globalists. Since all national armies will have been disbanded and the only army left will be under the control of the global authority, all nations will have no choice but to submit to the decisions of the world government. Well, all those plans, I mean, no more war sounds great, doesn't it? And all these plans, they kind of get to sound pretty good until you ask one uncomfortable question. Who's the guy managing the whole thing? What happens if an Adolf Hitler should gain control of the only army that is left? Well, of course, the world's checks and balances have been destroyed. And consequently, the world would be subject to the worst tyranny history's ever known. And promoters of globalism, they argue that, oh, that scenario's never going to happen. However, the Bible clearly prophesies that that is exactly what's going to happen as soon as the planned world government becomes strong enough to dominate the world. Only the world leader won't be Adolf Hitler. It's going to be somebody much worse than that. The Bible calls him the beast or the Antichrist. Folks, this stuff is coming as sure as I'm sitting here talking to you. And, you know, the only thing, yes, God, but along with God, if you look at history and everything that's going on right now, really the only thing standing between mankind and the just absolute emergence of this planned New World Order is the United States of America, which I believe God is working through, even though it looks like complete debauchery in most of it. I shouldn't say most of it. I should say some of it, because I know there are a lot of godly people here in America. Although Hollywood and all of them have a loud voice, there still are a lot of people that love God and want to serve God here in America. I know that. I know many of them personally, very influential people. They love God. A lot of times they don't know what to do with it, about it. So, the United States of America and the American people, the love of their national sovereignty, they're the only thing standing in the way of just a full-on world governing body. And Israel even. But I want to talk to you about America today. That's the topic here. So the United States of Europe, they've already surrendered their sovereignty to the European Union, the Parliament building in Brussels, Belgium. The leaders of the EU believe their European Union is only the first step to the coming global union. The establishment in America believe in the same thing. The establishment, the deep state. So think about our upcoming presidential election with this in mind. November 5th, 2024. Now you know Donald Trump doesn't want to play ball with this, you guys. Now you know why they're trying to destroy the guy. You can talk about all the other stuff you want. Oh, this on his taxes and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what all happened. I don't care. The reason they're trying to destroy the guy today is because he is a nationalist and America first, and he's against globalism. So they can, at all cost, they cannot allow the guy to get back in that office. Now, this, again, vote who you want to. I'm trying to get people to heaven. You say, no, you're pushing for Trump. I'm telling you, I'm talking about world government and whether the United States gets sucked up into that or not. That's what I'm talking about. You vote for who you want, and I'll still love you. But I'm just telling you the facts here. Americans are studying the presidential candidates, and of course, we're arguing all the issues. I do the same thing. And we got to do this before the upcoming presidential election on November 5th. Again, the issue on which all other issues turn is globalism. Will America continue down the path to globalization and the New World Order, or will we reverse our course and reclaim our sovereignty? And after the upcoming presidential debates, if we have one, I should say, I would just almost, if I was a betting man, I would almost bet money they would never allow Joe Biden on the stage with a Donald Trump. Again, I'm not a betting man, and I don't know if that'll ever happen. I'm just saying. After these upcoming presidential debates, if there is one, after the discussions of the political pundits and the, after all the arguments around the kitchen table and the election, it's all going to boil down to one issue. It should. Globalism versus nationalism. National sovereignty. Does America want to retain its sovereignty, or do we want to yield it up to a one world governing body? Now, these are the discussions that need to be had. All of these conservative entities, they need to have this discussion right here. Because I know prophetically there's a world government coming, and we cannot allow America to be sucked up into that vacuum, folks. We will lose everything we've got. Imagine if America was like Venezuela right now. Imagine if you and your children were having to dig in trash cans to find some food. You take away our sovereignty, you take away America. The ability to go to whatever church you want to go to. Go to communist China right now and try to do that. You're going to go to a government-approved church, or you're going to go underground to a church. And I know of people that are having underground churches. I will never name their name, but I know of people having churches in their garages, having churches in the basements, having churches in their attics. So, do we want to give up that in America? I love going to churches all over the United States and raising my hand and praising and worshiping God and feeling the presence of the Lord. And I don't have to worry about the police storming the door and taking me off to prison because I didn't worship a government-approved religion. I don't want to yield up our sovereignty. So, globalism versus national sovereignty. I mean, that's really the 800-pound gorilla sitting in every living room in America right now. You may not know about it, but it's sitting there. And if Joe Biden has his way and the rest of the establishment and the deep state, that's the goal in all this. You wonder, what's their goal? Absolute control. But they're being driven by a master. The master is Satan himself. You say, oh, there, Dave, you just went kind of crazy on me. You're arguing with the Bible. Revelation 13, 1 and 2 says, the dragon, or Satan, gives it its entity, its seat, power, and great authority. Satan is the driver behind this world governing body. Let me give you another example of globalism, and that is our open border across the southern United States. The border crisis origins is a global compact on migration. You know, at the heart of the immigration border disaster is the United States compliance with the provisions of the global compact on migration. Donald Trump pulled us out of all that. But Joe Biden turned around and pushed us right back into it, folks. You want to know why we have an open border down here? It's because our globalist president is doing what the globalist world government is telling him to do, and he's complying with it. That's what's going on our southern border. Folks, all of this is biblical. It's the world government that's going to be in power, ran by the Antichrist, all the way to the second coming of Jesus Christ. I don't want America to be part of that, and I don't think you do either.
They that understand what is taking place will instruct many.
Except a man is born again, he can't enter or see the kingdom of God.
I don't care what label you've been given or what label you've given yourself. You are essential. You still matter.
This is a journey, and when we get to the other side of that, that's where our prize is. That's where our reward is.
End time is not going anywhere.
You know, folks, these are all globalist actions. People, our current administration pushing us into one world government. The global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration, the GCM, was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly back in 2018. The United States did not take part in the agreement, which was touted to be, you know, to promote safe, orderly, and humane migration. Early in December of 2017, Rex Tillerson, who was the Secretary of State for the Trump administration at that time, he said that the United States had decided to end participation in the UN process to develop a global compact on migration. And he listed various problems, of which there are many, with the document, including its commitment to strengthen global governance and that it contains several policy goals which would undermine the sovereign right of the United States to enforce our immigration laws and secure our borders. So Donald Trump said, nope, pulled us out of that. However, in 2021, the Joe Biden administration began to retroactively support this global compact on migration and began participating in its implementation. And there was a former Panama border official that has corroborated that the UN's involvement in the border crisis even. Why would the President of the United States, we signed a Declaration of Independence, why would we do what we're being told? Why would we comply with this global compact on migration, opening our borders and allowing whosoever will to come? Because it's the process of globalism. Moving the United States, doing away with the nation, not protecting our borders, pushing us right into a world governing body. Joe Biden is a globalist. The deep state, the establishment, they're all working together to push us into this one world governing body. That's the goal of it all. They could care less about the United States of America. They're trying to destroy the United States so they can have their one world governing body. Unless, with the United States being a powerful nation who believes in sovereignty and a Declaration of Independence, they cannot have their world governing body. So they've got to train people and groom politicians to take these positions so that way they can get their edicts passed and abided to here in America. That's what's going on right now. And when somebody doesn't want to play ball with them, then they try to crucify them. Hence what they're doing to Donald Trump as we speak. Now, again, I don't know what all he's done in his life. Of course, I don't agree with it all, blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you, I know when he was in office, he was pulling us out of many of these things. Just like he pulled out of this, he was pulling us out of the World Health Organization. He was pulling us out of the Global Compact on Migration. Let me give you another one. The withdrawal from UNESCO. UNESCO, and this is going to be kind of a religious type situation, but I want to go through this because I could talk to you about the Sustainable Development Goals that Donald Trump didn't want to be a part of in many ways. The Paris Climate Agreement, he pulled us out. Joe Biden turned right around and shoved us back into all of it. But let me talk to you about UNESCO. This happens to do with Israel. UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. It's probably best known for its World Heritage Program to protect cultural sites, traditional sites around the world, and it advocates for humanitarian efforts on the environment, educational, and science. Okay. But for decades, UNESCO has undertaken the task of recognizing the most significant sites in the world as part of their famed World Heritage Site Program. But over time, like most of the United Nations organization, it has become very anti-Semitic, an anti-Israel entity. You say, not UNESCO? Yeah, UNESCO. Back in 2011, the U.S. stopped funding UNESCO because it voted to include Palestine as a member. There's never been a country of Palestine. There was a region called Palestine, but there's never been a nation of Palestine. On October 13th of 2016, Israel's prime minister said that today UNESCO adopted its second decision this year denying the Jewish people's connection to the Temple Mount, which is, of course, their holiest site for well over 3,000 years, which is just crazy. Okay, they're denying history. They're denying the Bible, more importantly than history. Well, on May 2nd, 2017, UNESCO passed a new resolution that referred throughout the document to Israel as the occupying power in Jerusalem, indicating that it had no legal or historical ties to any part of the city, which is just, that's insane. If you understand history and the Bible, Israel is the indigenous people of that land. And I know that there were people there before them, but Israel originated there, and they've had ties to it longer than anybody else. Well, let's talk about the Cave of the Patriarchs. On July 7th, 2017, UNESCO determined that the Cave of the Patriarchs, which is down in Hebron, that it was the UNESCO said that's a Palestinian heritage site, meaning that it's not a Jewish site, even though, listen to this, Abraham purchased the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron back in Genesis chapter 23. He didn't purchase it for Abraham and Ishmael and all of his descendants. How do I know that? Because Abraham and several members of his family are buried there, including Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah. And the only one missing there is, Rachel. Rachel was buried near Bethlehem because she died there in childbirth. So it's from these patriarchs and matriarchs that the nation of Israel was birthed. So it's clear to see but the UNESCO said, oh, Israel has no tie to that. Where'd you get that? So it's clear to see that they're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel, and they have a huge bias at that at the United Nations. And of course, there are many tentacles, and of which UNESCO is one of them. So it was only a matter of time before the Trump administration would take action, right? I mean, in October of 2017, the Department of the State notified UNESCO, the Director General, I think her name was Irina Bokova, that the U.S. decision had been made to withdraw from the organization and to seek to establish a permanent observer mission to UNESCO. And the decision was not taken lightly, obviously, and it reflects the U.S. concerns with mounting arrears at UNESCO and the need for fundamental reform in that organization and continuing anti-Israel bias at UNESCO. Now, I was hoping that meant that, hey, all in the future, whenever there was an ongoing anti-Israel United Nations organization, that the United States would withdraw from that entity, right? I mean, I was certainly hoping so. Oh, man. Then comes the Biden administration. And the Biden administration, after all this anti-Semitic activity in UNESCO, the Biden administration rejoined the United States to UNESCO in 2023. Now, how could you do that? You say, oh, Netanyahu, I'm your friend. We're your ally. We love Israel. And then you turn around and rejoin UNESCO, who is very, very, very anti-Semitic. It makes no sense. Well, actually, it does once you know who's in the White House, who's in the establishment, who's in the deep state. They're all in one big effort together. Do away with the United States and yield up our sovereignty to a world governing body. If somebody doesn't want to play ball with that, at all cost, we can never let them back in the White House. Now you're seeing what's playing out in the United States of America. Let me give you another example with the time I have left here. Another example of globalism. I mentioned them before, the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, they're like, let's say, twin efforts. They're designed specifically to govern the planet. One without the other is pointless. The Sustainable Development Goals, they were unanimously adopted by 193 members of the United Nations in September of 2015. And it's the United Nations Global Governing Plan. It's called the Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And according to their own website, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, along with their 169 targets, they demonstrate the scale and ambition of their new universal agenda. And the Sustainable Development Goals, they're an effort by the United Nations to control every single aspect of every person's life on the planet. It's a socialistic blueprint. And one of the main areas of critical importance is the planet itself. According to their 2030 agenda, they say we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption, production, sustainability, managing its natural resources, taking urgent action on climate change, yada, 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 right on down through there. And that's the reason for the Paris Climate Agreement. Without a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse gas emissions, it's impossible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, Donald Trump recognized the Paris Climate Agreement was a socialistic effort to redistribute the wealth of the world, to take money from the United States and to give it, it was a commitment to fund the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change and all this other stuff. So he said, no, we're not going to do that. And he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And he was moving us away from implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. He hadn't quite got there yet, but the Paris Climate Agreement was one of the ways of him doing that. So he starts down that road. He starts pulling us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. He comes out that, hey, climate change is a hoax, which I was jumping up and down because it absolutely is. Human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, is an absolute hoax. Okay? It's just propaganda by the United Nations to redistribute the wealth of the world. So Donald Trump said, no, it's just a big money-making scheme for them. They're redistributing the wealth of American money to overseas, and we're not going to allow it to happen. So he pulled us out of the Paris Climate Agreement. But guess what happens? The White House comes along, the Biden administration, and pretty much on day one pushes us right back into the Paris Climate Agreement and all of our financial obligations to that. You say, man, what's this really all about? Globalism. Again, I said it's the 800-pound gorilla, whether you know it or not, that is sitting in every living room in America. We have people in our White House that are trying to strip us of our sovereignty. You say, well, I'm worried about the gas prices are up a little bit and grocery prices. Look, I am too. I get it. But so much more important than that is the yielding up of our sovereignty to this world governing body. That's numero uno, folks. Because if that happens, you may not even be able to have a living room, much less be able to pay for groceries and all this other stuff, or to have a vehicle. So, I just wanted to give you the prophetic implications of some of these things that are coming up, because the Bible talks about a world governing body. It does say the United States will not be involved in that. Revelation 12:14, that we will pull out of this and stand with Israel against that all the way to the end. How we get there from here, I don't know. We're going to have to trust God through it all. And God will help us out through all of it. But I want you guys to be aware of what's really going on.